So I'm Lauren, I'm one of the managing partners at Bond. Quality of hire, I think we can all agree based on the last workshop, it's a meaty subject. You can go down rabbit holes, it can be quite confusing, it can be quite subjective, but I'm really excited to talk to the panel today on that subject exactly. So I'm going to ask you all to do an intro into your background, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and answer the first question. So the first question we've got is, what is your lived experience when it comes to quality of hire? Does anyone want to kick us off?
Go on, Jamie.
I've been volunteered. Hi everyone, James Hawkes from Expedia Group. I lead TA globally for marketing and corporate functions. My experience of quality of hire, lived experience, it's been a journey and one that we're back at the beginning of, I would say, and that's the trouble with this topic, I think. And it's been quite reassuring and validating to talk to my peers here and at the table about just how hard this is. I think that the thing for us is the length of the lead time for this doesn't survive significant organisational change, and we've had a lot. We've grown from Expedia Inc. to Expedia Group, replatformed, brought everything into a kind of house of brands, rotated the organisation through 90 degrees, senior leadership changes multiple times, both CEO and in talent acquisition and the people team, and that presses the reset button. So we felt like we were getting quite close. I was working with an analyst on this about 4 years ago, and I was actually looking at that work, preparing for this, and thinking it's regrettable that just got completely canned, and now needs kind of restarting. So we haven't cracked it. We've done some great work, I think, but we're kind of back to square one as an organisation. So happy to be in a room full of peers tackling the same problem.
Hi, I'm Cheryl White. I'm currently head of TA at Bolt. I've been there for about 2 years. And I was thinking about this because prior to Bolt, I was with Meta for quite a period of time and Microsoft. And particularly at Meta, quality of hire was just a dashboard at your fingertips with these amazing data visualizations where, you just didn't have to even interpret it. It gave you a whole analysis and insights around it. So it was something I didn't really have to think about very much. And now my experience is more around, are we talking about quality of hire? Are we talking about quality of employee and the employee experience? How does onboarding factor into this? How are we actually measuring this? And honestly, I'm just at the starting point of thinking about how we could tackle this, because I think we're actually looking and focusing on the wrong metrics often and looking at the wrong things because they're easier to measure. So yeah, again, grateful to be here with some great minds and also looking forward to the workshop this afternoon as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate Berry. I'm head of HR delivery at Rotalk. So I'm my background, I've been there nearly 18 months, but my background is predominantly generalist. So I'm here on the other side of the spectrum as a HR leader, generalist, and yeah, also happy to be here and be invited today. Lived experience of quality of hire, I think. Similar to Cheryl and James's introductions, I don't think in my 20 years, I would say I've experienced us cracking it. But I think in my experience of where we've got close to having good quality of hire is where, and we've discussed it already this afternoon, but where we are able to articulate clearly and quite simply what is the definition of quality in our organisation. And similar to what James is saying, I think there's been moments in my career where I've worked for organisations where we've had some activity or focus where we've got close to nailing it, and I've been very fortunate to work for some incredible brands. And actually in my current role, what's different for me now is being in an industrial engineering B2B organisation that unless you're in the actuator business, you wouldn't have a clue who Rotork is. And if anyone here knows what an actuator is, I'll be impressed, because before, oh, all right, great. Because before I went to Rotork, I didn't even know what an actuator was. So outside of our niche industry where Rotork is market leading, you would never have heard of Rotork. So that's another level of complexity to be able to articulate that quality. And I think that's what Rotork is now battling with as well, because like all of us, the war on talent is getting a lot harder. And we are also trying to change and evolve our organisation for the future, and are in the middle of trying to define what does that mean. So that's my past, but also current lived experience, I would say.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Madison. I'm the People Director at Vertical Aerospace. If you haven't heard of Vertical, like I think Kate was saying, the easiest way to describe us is we are creating flying electric taxis, which sounds like the coolest job in the world, to be honest, and probably feels like it. So I would definitely go check that out. But past has been Vodafone. I was at for probably about 4 or 5 years. Then at OVO Energy, which is a big energy retail business in the UK. I'd say most of my background is generalist. So even though I've done, I think, nearly every job across the entire people cycle, TA actually probably is the least. But now, yeah, so more generalist.
Why we're here together.
I'm very lucky in my team that I have Aaron, who was here last time. He's leading head of TA. But my lived experience, I think, of qualitative hire is, when I keep thinking about it, is I've always felt like I've been a part of nailing one part of the equation really, really well, but knowing that it just is never going to be enough, whether it's been doing an amazing, rigorous assessment process that felt like it was getting to the exact point of what we're looking for and finding the right quality, but knowing it didn't matter because later on we just didn't have a great performance enablement process. We couldn't measure performance. We didn't really know how engaged people were. And that's probably been my story over every role I've done. Has always felt like there's been different parts and nailing performance, but not having the hiring process. And I think this has become really topical for us now as a business, because the reason I know the actuators is part of the aircraft, but fundamentally the business is trying to do something that's never been done before. Our aircraft is a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. So if you think about in 5 years' time, you'd have flying taxis across London, New York, Japan, etc. Up until probably 2 years ago, we didn't have the battery technology to do it. So a lot of the talent we're looking for, the roles have never really existed. So we're kind of starting to think about, it's great that we've got the technical capability, but I think as a lot of us were talking about, we need to really be clear what qualitative hire means. I'd say it's a lot easier for us at the moment. We're only 350 people, so we can look across the whole span of stuff, but we are in the process of building loads of foundations, which means it feels great because we're looking at it now, we have the opportunity to influence it. But similar to the rest, I don't think I've ever experienced that full systematic process working well. So, yeah.
So why do you think quality of hire is so difficult? What do you think are some of the blockers that we face in being able to define what quality of hire means?
The more you get into all the different touch points in the employee life cycle that influence a good quality hire talent employee, there's so many different elements to it. And as James said in his, you can do all this amazing work on it, but then things move on, and so it's how, and I think one of the groups mentioned, how do you keep it relevant? How you were talking, Cheryl, about how it stays in line with where the business is heading. And certainly some of my previous employees, like a Dyson that I used to work for, they are definitely an example of an organisation that are moving at such a pace that, yeah, keeping up with that. So I think that is a big blocker, is as you were just saying, Josh, how do you keep that across the whole life cycle and all those different influences? And even some of the things that we were talking about just now in the workshop, I made a note saying some amazing ideas in the room, but a lot of them are a huge amount of work. Yeah. Like, we're trying to do a minimum viable product, but even some of the ideas that we had, that's a massive piece of work. And I was like, how can we distill that down into something that is a bit more manageable, but we can then test and see what the response will be? So I think that's a blocker.
A lot of us talked about identifying or understanding what does great look like, and for me that's so variable across so many companies. So I have very high volume hiring of blue collar frontline workers who are building scooters and distributing them across cities, versus principal software engineers and chief marketing officers. Like it's so different. How there isn't one standardized way of saying this is what a great quality of hire looks like across all those functions. So it's almost, if you can crack it for one, which is a huge piece of work, then you have to eat, sleep, play, repeat across every other function, and it's not that simple. You have to re-innovate, rethink how it works, what makes sense for that business function or vertical, what is their mission and how does it align with that. One of the things that I really liked that was mentioned was around connecting it to the overall company mission. But I think you mentioned around, Alistair, around does this person or these hires, do they impact the performance of the race car, right? And that's the thing that I think is quite key to hold on to, is if we can think about, are these people, regardless of what function it is, are they actually going to impact the mission and direction of the company? It's not standardized across a business, it's variable.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. It's for us, it's been the definition. And if I link it back to the work I mentioned a few years ago that we were doing, I think we were getting somewhere, and what we'd come up with was a model that looked at the 9-box performance and potential grid, and then there was a multiplier for the manager feedback. And the thing that slowed us down, and it wasn't the reason it got canned, that was organisational change, but a thing that slowed us down was the challenge of, well, are we not over-indexing on kind of immediate performance and potential, when actually, and we've talked about this on our table, but really grossly undervaluing your experienced specialists who love what they do and make it, and want to excel at that year in, year out. And those people are really worth a lot to any business. And so that kind of derailed the conversation a little bit, and we were back to the drawing board, and then change happened around us. And then I think it's also perhaps what we hadn't done was take the step back and think, well, ultimately, what should all of this be in service of? And so on a hard table, Alistair, who works for an F1 team, was saying, well, everything's about making the car faster. And that's kind of really appealing. And every business has, I think you should be able to define some kind of North Star, and then work it back from there. So I think it's also reasoning from first principles a little bit.
Yeah. I think I remember when we were talking on a call together and talking about obstacles, it feels so hard because there's different levels of challenges. So we talk a lot about the macro level challenge of having business strategy aligned and the leaders brought in because it's a system. I think everyone's probably talked about, if you ever really want to do it perfect, it feels like there's no system, technology or platform that would ever enable it right now. So you've got that problem. And then you've also got the kind of real micro problems. I think I was talking to Aaron about this the other day, is that it's even odd. I think a lot of us in kind of the recruitment world know that just doing interviews doesn't give you a good sense of whether someone's going to be a great performer in the organisation. Yet, oddly, we balance rigour of assessment versus candidate experience. And it's like, to quantify what I'm saying, I was saying, pushing Aaron the other day, saying, I want a more rigorous assessment process. And his kind of pushback was, well, if we make it more rigorous, there's potential that we're not going to attract the right people because it's too long process. And you think, if you're battling right at the beginning of being even able to assess whether someone is going to be great at the beginning, no worry. Of course, you're going to have a problem later on. So I think there's micro level trends and then there's the macro, and that just makes it even more complex.
And I think that's more and more now, that experience, it is a candidate's market right now. I think all of us have areas of our business that are very niche and or like don't exist at all because what you're doing is like totally future. But yeah, you can't turn people off in that way. And even the big brands now, they will have a certain pool, but if you also overdo it, I fully agree. Yeah. But then how do you have that reassurance that you're going to get that quality that you need? Yeah.
I think as well we anchor too much on quality of hire and not quality of employee, and where accountability actually sits. Because quality of hire, TA is accountable for that, or should be, largely. I mean, obviously hiring managers who make the actual hiring decisions, etc. But the quality of candidates we're bringing into the business and introducing is TA's responsibility. But then from there, there's so many other variables of who's accountable for what. And I think it's more important to actually anchor on quality of employee and the tenure of those employees. I've recently got attrition in my team, and I've lost for the first time, I've been there in 2 years, the kind of OGs, the people that have been there for 4 or 5 years and have this intellectual property, this knowledge, these incredible relationships, and they're leaving, and they've been there, 4 or 5 years. That's a natural cycle, and they're going on to do great things. But it's really hurting me now because I'm having to bring new people in. It's going to take them at least 6 to 12 months to even get close to where these people are. So I think actually anchoring more on I know there'll be good quality of hires that we bring in because I trust my assessment process and the ongoing leadership behind that. But I think that, that experience and employee life cycle is more important than just the quality of hire metric.
And we touched on as well having the patience to really, when we were talking in our group about how long do you look at whether it's truly quality, I think a lot of businesses don't have the patience to see, where does this go, and has it truly been a quality employee, because that's really it. You need time to allow that to bed in and for that to really come through, and that's then joining up that whole talent development process. And I don't think there's many businesses that are doing that particularly well, because we typically work in a short term, we're in the current business year focus. How do we get this year delivered? We're not thinking far enough ahead and giving ourselves a time to actually test and see whether that is going to be a quality employee.
Yeah.
But are there even many businesses who are looking at kind of each function and I guess like working with the hiring community to say, as a team, we need you to define exactly what good looks like, whether it's quality of hire or quality of employee within your team? Are there many businesses even doing that from a leadership perspective? So setting out really clear expectations?
I don't think so. I mean, I think to your point, there's businesses are often driven by short-term thinking. So I've kind of complained about organisational change and leadership change, but there's also being driven by what's the share price doing, which kind of most of us are probably to some extent affected by, and that's the thing. I think defining something like this, it's hard to measure. Important things are often hard to measure, especially in the people space, and therefore it's getting the commitment and the buy-in and having someone with the vision, pardon the pun, to see that through over the perhaps 12 to 18 months that it takes to get it implemented.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to the next question, why do you think cracking quality of hire is such a strategic advantage for businesses?
For me, I think I've been fortunate to work in these environments of excellence, right, where everyone around, I remember going into Facebook on my first day and being like, look at me, I'm great. I know loads of people here. My director poached me from, I'm going to nail this. And then was very quickly, very humbled by the amazing people that are around me and were innovating beyond a level that I'd thought of because of the environment I was in. And at first I didn't like it. And I actually thought I've made a mistake here. I'm not the top dog, right? And then I very quickly realised that actually these people are super supportive, and because of the right culture, they want to share, they want to learn from me, and that creates this environment of excellence. And when you can create that, and a lot of it is of the quality of the employees that you're bringing in, it's the whole experience that comes with that, means that all of the things that were on that list around hiring process, EVP, become very natural and organic in how they develop. And I would have referred anyone to come at Facebook in the kind of peak and prime of my experience there, because it was just a brilliant place to be. And I think that is the game changer. It's like that environment of excellence. Excellent people attract other excellent people, right? And I'm sure many of you have also, myself included, been in an unfortunate situation to work with very questionable people in very questionable teams, and you're not performing at your best, and you're not happy, and you're not engaged. I'm sure NPS is low for the company. You certainly wouldn't refer people in or want to bring the best people you know. You might be embarrassed or whatever it might be. So for me, I think it's that whole quality piece that has such a big impact on the experience that then makes all of the rest of talent acquisition almost quite easy, because your referrals drive up, your tenure and retention dries up, you're doing less hiring and focusing really on amazing quality and targeting the right people. So that I think is a bit of a game changer. If you can find that sweet spot, it works.
And I just build on that because I was listening to what you're saying, thinking about some of my time. So when I was at Dyson, I joined Dyson when there were like 5,000 employees in 2012. So been around early stages, and then I was fortunate enough to be there for nearly 10 years when it went through the crazy growth. And what you were talking about when you went to Facebook, similar to me. So when I moved into the engineering department at Dyson and worked with the R&D department, and then I also felt very quickly the stupidest person in the room, like mega brains. And that was probably in Dyson's heyday, where, the brand just attracted, people attracted people, and it still is an organisation where there's some incredible people, and that won't change. But that naturally then happened. And then what was interesting when I was at Dyson, they kind of then reversed engineered it. They were like, something's working here, but they didn't have it defined because it was an early stage business. So they kind of built this great business, and then it was rocketing, and then they were like getting to a scale where like we need to define this a bit more, we need to then put a bit more structure, be a bit more corporate in our approach. So I was in the company when we were just trying to get some things right because it had got to that scale. So they then kind of did a great piece of work to just sort of go, so what is it? What is this essence? What is that magic? That the source. I was there when we did that, sort of similar to what you were talking about, James, at Expedia. So they did that reverse bit, and I think for a time that worked really well, actually, because it was a way, to explain that to people. And when I was, as a generalist, hiring people into the organisation or developing people in the company, I was able to articulate that from my own experience, and I think that then worked really well for that time that I was there. So that, to me, is my own lived experience of why is it important. Is because that's how you then generate revenue, you grow, you become an exciting organisation, and then people want to be part of that. And that's why this is so important.
I really like that point, because I think we had a conversation on the table, the whole building a sustainable business is the strategic advantage, because I think if the reason the definition of quality of hire is so important is you can focus, like most businesses do, on the really short-term gain of just bringing loads of great technical people. And we've, like I said earlier on, we have this challenge where you're finding people that don't really exist, and it's going to cause the short-term success we need. We're in a race against 5 other businesses across the world, but it's just really obvious. You can see that it's not going to matter in 2 years because the business won't be sustainable, turnover will be extremely high because the culture isn't great. And I think that will be a strategic advantage, is more longer term thinking rather than just a short term gain of business success on deliverables in year or 2 years out versus 5-10 years. It's all like those books, isn't it? You want to build a 100-year business rather than a 2-year really profitable business.
I agree with all of that. And I think for me, the competitive advantage or strategic advantage for us is what it could unlock for us and elevate our influence on the business. And the reason I say that, and I'm excited that we've got a new CEO at Expedia who's very people focused, and I know that she won't talk about people as being an important asset, but understands that her business is her people. I think if we can come up with a really good quality of hire model, and then be able to demonstrate, well, we did this and it had this impact on our quality of hire. I think that's a game changer for our credibility and influence in the business, and therefore, I think we all know, as I think we're all HR professionals in this room. Again, back to my point of what's things that are important are hard to measure, but we know that a lot of what we do is incredibly valuable and impactful, and does drive what the business is doing. But being able to articulate that can be a challenge, and this would be, I think, quite a significant game changer for us.
Closing question before we open up to the floor, and this is a bit of a curveball, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Apologies. But you mentioned there's this almost like secret sauce, this kind of centre of excellence, like culture in certain businesses that you've worked within. Is there one key thing that you think contributes to that almost feeling of we're a really high performing team, or this really is like a centre of excellence, that you would say, if I could lift this and bring this into another business, it would be this one key thing?
I think it's consistency of keeping that quality bar, and diversity, cognitive diversity, making sure that you're not just hiring a bunch of lemmings that are all going to come in and think in the same way and do the same thing and follow it, but people that can actually challenge, mean well, have healthy debate, bring different diverse thoughts to the table, different experiences, different backgrounds, but whilst all still being able to maintain this consistent quality of hiring bar or reach that right assessment level that means that they're enabled to be set up for success at the level that you're hiring in and the role that you're bringing them into. And that's really hard because balancing consistency and diversity is almost in conflict with itself. But I think that's been the game changer in the environments I've worked in, for sure.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't have a straightforward answer, but the thing that's on my mind is the engagement. And so I think a secret sauce in any high-performing team that I've led or been a part of has been a high level of engagement. And I just think that's an important part of the mix as we think about quality. This would be oversimplifying, but I almost think you could, if you had nothing else, could you just tie it to the employee engagement survey on the basis that a highly engaged employee is probably a good performer as well, and is likely having a good impact on those around them and helping to create an environment for others to succeed. So that's at least an element of it, I think.
Yeah, I was going to give an answer, but it just felt like the most boring, easiest one, which was the businesses that's felt like the secret sauce when you really distilled it down is stuff that we always probably read and hear about. But I think it's generally true is the whole kind of psychological safety piece. And I say that like that would be very difficult. How would you measure that and keep track of that? But the things I often find myself wanting to focus on, even when I'm looking at qualitative hire, just real basics like self-awareness and learning agility. And I just think those two real things are massive because just basic self-awareness and the willingness and ability to learn and change is so important. As I think Sharon said, it anchors on everything. So I think as a attribute secret sauce, I think those things are so important. They are across every function, across every team. It doesn't matter if it's technical functional, but it also just allows you to have people that hopefully are going to grow with the business rather than just be stuck in ways. So
yeah, mine is linked to that is where does the business want to go? So what is its future plans and how credible are they, right? So is that something you can get behind and actually you really think has got substance behind it? Because lots of businesses can say, we want to be this by, but truly is that something that it seems credible, exciting, and people want to get on board? And you just, we're humans and we want to be part of something and feeling like we're able to then grow with it, like you said. So I think that's one secret sauce. I think if you've got something that people can get excited about and want to come along with, and then I also put kind of leadership. Yeah. The strength of the leaders. If you think about the businesses you work for, have worked for, who is it that got you in there? A couple of people, right? You'll have met a few people, either from your network or they will have got you inspired to work there. And that is normally a leader of some description. Those are the sort of two things that I thought of.
I think two of the points that you've made there, I think for me, the engagement piece probably also ties into belief in the mission and belief in this purpose. Yeah. I think you have really engaged employees when they are behind the business goals and they quite clearly see the vision, they get behind it. So,
and I think they forgive the foibles if you've got that. So every business has its problems and its frustrations, but if those two things are right, you'll deal with those bad days where some of the annoying things or less good things about the company drive you crazy. But I think if that's what brings people in, keeps people, I think, despite what's thrown at them.
There's one point before we finish, Lauren, actually would be really interesting. I saw the post for this House of Visionaries. I was looking at the comments, and I think maybe you responded or some responded. A guy was like, is this just a geography thing? We've basically solved this in the Bay. And I was like, I'm going to reach out to that person. Because he was like, that's not even a conversation outside of Europe. And I was thinking, that cannot be the case. But I've connected with him already.
Feels like the perfect place to stop.
Yeah.
So thank you. Could everybody join me in thanking the rest of the panel? Thank you.